Julian Assange is one step closer to being extradited from the UK to the US, and therefore one step closer to his execution. Is this right? What is a war criminal? Who are war criminals? What crime has Assange committed? Hello there, you 5.5 million awakening wonders. Together we grow. Together we live in a reality that has pretty scary components to it. Not least of it, the Julian Assange trial, the Julian Assange situation. Julian Assange currently in Belmarsh, held in the UK as a result of his publication of documents that were classified. As Chris Hedges, recent guest on the podcast, my podcast, Under the Skin, said, all publications did that. The Guardian did that. The New York Times did that. El País did that. All them different, national and international newspapers did that. So why is Julian Assange in prison? What will happen if he is indeed extradited? And why is this an important case, particularly when we are in the midst of a conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which is a highly moralized and much speculated upon conflict? Before we get into this important, baffling, intriguing, terrifying story, I want to remind you that I'm on tour. There's a link in the description for the few remaining dates. And if you want to sign up to my mailing list and receive information about my live one-day event with the great Wim Hof, click on the link that will be up there at the end of the video. But now let's get into the important and terrifying Julian Assange story.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited back to the US to face espionage charges.
So many of the documents and files that Assange and WikiLeaks published led to new transparency in some of the wars that the West has waged on places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And I found Assange to be most insightful about the nature of the military-industrial complex, the nature of modern warfare, the nature of modern surveillance. Let's not forget that Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, modern whistleblower heroes, communicated with Assange. And let's remember too that what Assange did, many major news organizations, to their credit, also did, publishing these stories. Why is it that only Julian Assange is in this position now? And how can the Julian Assange case be used to help us understand the morality of war, the morality of transparency, the morality of surveillance? This is from Caitlin Johnston's Substack. This is happening at the same time the United States and the United Kingdom are loudly demanding accountability for alleged war crimes by the Russian military in Ukraine, which is interesting because attempting to bring accountability for war crimes is precisely why Julian Assange is in prison. So that's just one way that we can view this case. How can you assume that the Western agenda with regard to the Ukrainian conflict ought not be questioned or queried while understanding the Julian Assange case? All of us agree that Russian military action in Ukraine is having terrible consequences and is creating a humanitarian crisis. But what I sort of know is you can't just blindly trust America's and America's corporate media arm's version of events. You have to question it because the evidence for that line of inquiry has already been provided. You have to query, I suppose, when considering the case of Julian Assange, what his motivations might be, what his intentions were. I met Julian Assange and he's an unusual dude. I mean, he's a computer person. He's a head-down computer hacker person. We're not talking about Bradley Cooper here. We're not talking about easy, affable people that are easy to chat to. And also there was some complexity around the trial. There were accusations and allegations, as far as I know, none of which were proven to be true. What we do know is that Julian Assange revealed stuff that changed the way we view power, that changed the way we view surveillance, that changed the way we view war, and in each of those cases made it more difficult for the powerful to operate with impunity. He is a war criminal, President Biden said of Vladimir Putin earlier this month. He should be held accountable. Now, if you believe that to be true, then you have to have a degree of objectivity or openness to accountability across the board. People call this whataboutism now, don't they? Oh, you no matter, Russia, it's different, don't do whataboutism. Well, the reason current geopolitics causes so much strife and confusion, additionally to the obvious horrors of war, is I feel that we can't go, no, we're the goodies, we're good guys, we're basically on the right track. And this case is one of the reasons that we have so much doubt and angst, because Julian Assange, when you see, oh, guess what, there's all sorts of shady stuff going on, contracts are awarded, do you go, what? No. Surveillance? The CIA did that? You just go, yeah, I know that. Julian Assange told us stuff we already knew, but for which there was no evidence. He gave us the evidence, and for this, it seems, he may yet be executed. The most powerful government in the world, which serves as the hub of the most powerful empire that has ever existed, is working to extradite a journalist for exposing its war crimes while simultaneously rending its garments over war crime allegations against another government. It's interesting how those things can happen simultaneously. In a way, wouldn't you appreciate it if America went, look, we're trying to run the world here. We can't have him mouthing off, this geezer. We're trying to run the world. Instead of pretending, oh no, what he done there, that was espionage. He's a spy. He's not a spy. Put it on the internet. Dun, 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 dun. Send. What Assange done is embarrassed them, provided evidence for what most of us intuitively know, that in many cases the state do not operate on behalf of or at the behest of the people that they were elected to represent. They represent their own interests and they will lie when necessary. They will kill when necessary. Assange provided evidence of what we all already know. Julian Assange should, I'm going to go out on a limb, not be extradited to America. Whatever complexities that dude has as an individual, with regard to this matter, he has behaved literally heroically. You would think a power structure that had recently been caught red-handed committing war crimes and is currently in the process of imprisoning a journalist for exposing those war crimes would at least have the sense not to yell too loudly about war crimes for a little while. But this is how confident the empire is in its ability to control the narrative. I sometimes think we're too exhausted to hold people to account. I sometimes think like, oh God, that Julian Assange thing, what happened? Wasn't there some... Oh God, I don't know what's going on with that dude. Yeah, it's too complicated. Oh, what's happening in Russia, Ukraine? Oh, it's too... Unless you're directly connected, unless you're like, yeah, how do you keep your mind active when there's so much information, so much contradiction, so much social pressure just to believe one unquestioning sort of vanilla perspective on whatever issue happens to be the germane matter of the day? You're supposed to think this about that. Oh, well, I generally have this tendency not to trust what I'm told by authority figures because my life, even outside of government and media, has shown me that is not wise. Don't let them trap you in a goldfish brain, continually forgetting that just 10, 20 years ago there was this spate of conflicts in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Oh, they're terrorists somehow. How exactly? Shut up, don't matter. Oh, Julian Assange, there's evidence that they're doing this for reasons other than what's been explained. Here's some evidence on surveillance from heroes like Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden. What? Look, forget about that. Forget about that. Just swim round the goldfish bowl. Oh, what do we care about this week? Oh. Stay awake. Stay alert. Don't forget what's happened. Use the case of Assange with all of his imperfections and contradictions to remind you of one incontrovertible truth. Power is complex. Authority must be questioned. Authority must be accountable. Conversation is required. You can't just bang people up and then ship them around, nut them off when it's convenient because they what? Told the truth. And this is Chris Hedges, also on Substack, because none of these people are allowed to write anywhere else anymore. Let us name Julian Assange's executioners. Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, Scott Morrison, Theresa May, Lenin Moreno, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Mike Pompeo, Hillary Clinton. Let us acknowledge that the goal of these executioners who discuss kidnapping and assassinating Assange has always been his annihilation. Oh yeah, there was a CIA plot, wasn't there? Of course there would be. Assange committed empire's greatest sin. He exposed it as a criminal enterprise. He documented its lies, callous disregard for human life, rampant corruption and innumerable war crimes. Republican or Democrat, Conservative or Labour, Trump or Biden. It does not matter. Another important message of Assange. So if you're wondering, what does Assange mean? What does Assange help us to realise? Another thing is that bipartisan democracy is kind of an illusion where it matters. Not that there aren't important issues that get picked up around all sorts of topics that maybe you particularly care about. But when it comes to the crunch, it's the same thing. The same superstructure houses the pageantry and livery of these apparently shifting Democratic parties, as that list compiled by Hedges there demonstrates. The goons who oversee the empire sing from the same satanic songbook. Empires always kill those who inflict deep and serious wounds. That's why we're going off air soon. Assange is charged in the US under 17 counts of the Espionage Act and 1 count of hacking into a government computer. So I suppose that probably boils down to revealing military information that could lead to the harm of service people. Let me offer you this. I admire service people, men and women that are willing to put their lives on the line. You know, when that Marine spoke out, we were double supportive of him. I personally am friends with people in military service. But I think what Julian Assange did was not put troops, regular troops at risk. He put powerful interests at risk. Like, oh no, the troops, the precious troops. What are the troops doing now? sending them off to a war to make money. If the troops are the issue, then you would have a completely different set of systems in order to ensure that wars only happen when absolutely necessary, that we always aimed at diplomacy, and that you've certainly never embarked on wars that are primarily there to drive profit, power, resources, all the stuff you know. You don't need me to tell you that. Hit me up in the comments below. The charges could see him sentenced to 175 years in prison, even though he's not a US citizen and WikiLeaks is not a US-based publication. None of their business in some ways, except for the exposure of, what Caitlin Johnston there called war crimes. If found guilty, it will effectively criminalise the investigative work of all journalists and publishers anywhere in the world of any nationality who possess classified documents to shine a light on the inner workings of power. So what it will also do is mean that mainstream media won't report stuff that is adverse to the will of the powerful. Have you noticed that anywhere lately? Have you noticed that somehow the interests of the government and big pharma and big corporations all seem to line up nicely? Sometimes there's a little bit of complexity around traditional legacy media and the new big tech companies that are replacing them. But right now, they're doing deals. They're putting through regulation and legislation to iron out those inconsistencies. So another thing Assange represents is the freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of communication. You heard anything about them stories or those issues lately? Another thing that this will do is facilitate clamping down on independent voices. It will also inspire fear in independent media voices. I, for example, don't feel especially confident when talking about. So Julian Assange talked about the hypocrisy of the powerful, how much prison. I'd like to take this opportunity to say, government, what a good job they're doing, governing and that, trying their hardest. And what about the military-industrial complex? Earning a good few quid for a damn good product. Lockheed Martin, whoosh, you should see that stuff fly. Mainstream media, it's entertaining though, isn't it? You watch it, the way they got a suit and tie on, and then there's a lady one and a man one. Good work, guys. Keep it up. This mortal assault on the press will have been orchestrated, we must not forget, by a democratic administration. Are we the baddies, Hans?
Are we the baddies?
It will set a legal precedent that will delight other totalitarian regimes and autocrats who, emboldened by the United States, will gleefully seize journalists and publishers, no matter where they are located, who publish inconvenient truths. Principles and values must mean stuff like, we freely communicate and we allow dissent. Not like, we allow them to dissent because that's actually in alignment with what we want and our agenda and our objectives. You're dissenting? Yeah, you just did dissent on me. Kill him! There is no legal basis to hold Julian in prison. There's no legal basis to try him, a foreign national, under the Espionage Act. Wow, it's illegal. Assange, at tremendous personal cost, warned us. He gave us the truth. The ruling class is crucifying him for this truth. With his crucifixion, the dim lights of our democracy go dark. What this reminds us is that if you dissent against power, if you interrupt the interests of the powerful, if you're willing to risk your life in order to stand up for the interests of ordinary people against the powerful, if you're willing to expose hypocrisy, injustice, lies, they will find you wherever you are in the world. You're in the Ecuadorian embassy, you'll be out of there, son. You're in Belmarsh in the UK, we'll have you out of there, son. You're coming to America to face justice. What do you mean by justice? Whatever we tell you justice is. Is that the world you want to live in? Because I'm not so sure it's the one I want to live in. Hit me up in the comments below if you understand this case, if you think there's nuances to it, if you're a service person who's ever felt at risk as a result of the actions of whistleblowers, or do you think more broadly their interests are about corporate centralised corruption that supersede the interests of individual military battalions and stuff? Let me know all of this. We want to learn. We want to get as much as possible. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one and this one. And if you want to come see me and Wim Hof, special one-day event, you've got to sign up to my mailing list to get the information, to get the tickets, because there's only a few of them. All right, I love you. Stay free.